The Veth Empire had conquered 347 worlds across 3 galaxies. They were old. They were powerful. They had never lost a war. Their ships were massive and black, built from metals that did not exist on most planets. Their weapons could turn cities to ash in seconds. Their soldiers stood 8 feet tall and felt no fear. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet on his screen. Earth. That was what the creatures there called it. His scouts had studied this world for 2 years. They had watched the humans fight each other over land and oil and ideas. They had seen their primitive rockets and their chemical weapons. They had laughed. A species still killing itself, Cole had said to his officers. They will fall in days. The Veth Armada numbered 9,700 warships. Each ship carried thousands of soldiers and enough firepower to destroy a continent. They moved through space like a dark cloud, blocking out the stars behind them. No world had ever survived such a force. No world had even come close. On Earth, it was 3:47 in the morning when the alarms began. Lieutenant General Kim Tae-ho was asleep in his quarters at the United Earth Defense Council headquarters in Seoul. The phone beside his bed rang once before he grabbed it. "Sir, we have a situation," said the voice on the other end. "You need to see this now." Tae-ho was dressed and in the command center within 8 minutes. The room was filled with officers staring at screens, their faces pale. On the main display he saw them, thousands of red dots moving toward Earth. Each dot was a ship. Each ship was death. "How long?" Tae-ho asked. 12 hours until they reach orbit," answered Park Jin-ho, his head of orbital defense. Jin-ho was a calm man, but his hands were shaking. Maybe less. Tae-ho looked at the screen for a long moment. He had spent 30 years preparing for war. He had fought terrorists and rogue states and everything in between. But this was different. This was not a war they were supposed to win. This was extinction knocking on their door. "Wake everyone," he said quietly. "Every leader, every general, every soldier. Call them all." Within 2 hours, the world knew. Television screens showed the approaching fleet. People ran through streets in panic. Churches filled with prayers. Governments that had been enemies for decades called each other and asked the same question. What do we do? Tae-ho assembled his command team in a bunker deep beneath the mountains. Yoon Hana arrived first. She was the director of the Global Resistance Network, a system designed for exactly this moment. Her job was to make sure that even if governments fell, the fight would continue. "The underground networks are ready," Hana said. "Every major city has hidden weapons, supplies, and communication equipment. If they take the surface, we fight from below." Choi Woo-jin came next. He was the commander of Earth's defense fleet, such as it was. 340 ships. Most of them were small. Most of them were old. Against 9,700 enemy warships, they were nothing. "We cannot win in space," Woo-jin admitted. "But we can hurt them. We can make them bleed before they land." Tae-ho nodded slowly. He had known this truth for years. Earth was not ready to fight an alien invasion. No one had believed it would happen so soon. But here they were. "Then we do not fight their war," Tae-ho said. "We fight ours." He pulled up a map of Earth on the main screen. Red zones showed population centers. Blue zones showed military installations. Green zones showed the hidden bunkers, the secret bases, the places where humanity would make its stand. "They think we are primitive," Tae-ho continued. "They think we are weak because we fight among ourselves. But that is exactly why we are dangerous. We have spent 10,000 years learning how to kill. We have invented weapons they cannot imagine. We have fought in jungles and deserts and frozen mountains. We know war better than any species in this galaxy." The others listened in silence. They knew he was right. Humans were not peaceful creatures. They never had been. Every generation had known war. Every nation had tasted blood. It was terrible. It was tragic. And right now, it might be the only thing that could save them. Contact every nuclear power, Tejo ordered. Tell them to arm everything. Contact every submarine, every hidden base, every secret facility. I want every weapon we have pointed at the sky. Jinho hesitated. Sir, nuclear weapons in orbit could devastate our own planet. If we lose, there will be no planet, Tejo replied. We use everything. We hold nothing back. Far above Earth, Admiral Cole watched his fleet approach the blue world. He felt no concern. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. First, fear, then resistance, then surrender, then death. These humans would be no different. Begin the standard invasion sequence, he ordered. Disable their communications. Destroy their orbital defenses. Establish air superiority. We will have this planet by tomorrow. His officers moved to obey. Ships began to break formation, moving into attack positions. The first wave would be 800 vessels, more than enough to crush any opposition. Cole allowed himself a small smile. Another world would fall. Another species would bow before the Veth Empire. It was the natural order of things. He did not notice the tiny satellites hidden among Earth's space debris. He did not detect the submarines rising toward the surface of Earth's oceans. He did not see the missile silos opening across 6 continents. He did not know that humanity had been waiting for this moment. Lieutenant General Tejo stood in his bunker and watched the enemy fleet grow closer. His heart was calm. His mind was clear. Behind him, officers relayed orders to every corner of the planet. Above him, 300 pilots prepared to die. They sent 9,700 ships, Tejo said softly. Let us see how many we send home. The clock showed 6 hours until contact. Earth held its breath. And in the darkness of space, the Veth Armada descended like a storm, unaware that they were flying into the mouth of something ancient and hungry and utterly without mercy. The humans were ready. The first wave of Veth's ships entered Earth's orbit at exactly 9:14 in the morning. 800 warships, each one larger than a football stadium, moved into position above the major cities. Their commanders expected fear. They expected panic. They expected the easy victory they had enjoyed on hundreds of other worlds. They did not expect what happened next. Baek Minji was 26 years old. She sat at her station, aboard the orbital platform Mugunghwa, watching her screens fill with enemy signals. Her hands moved across her keyboard with practiced speed. Around her, other officers were praying or crying, or simply staring at nothing. Minji was not afraid. She was angry. All stations, this is Mugunghwa, she said into her microphone. Her voice was steady. Activation code received, beginning transmission now. She pressed a single button. Across the planet, hidden systems came alive. Satellites that had been sleeping for years suddenly woke up. Underground silos opened their doors. Submarines surfaced in every ocean, and in 1,000 bunkers, soldiers armed weapons that the world had hoped would never be used. The Veth did not understand what they were seeing. Their sensors detected thousands of small objects rising from the planet's surface. They looked primitive. They looked harmless. They were nuclear warheads. The first missiles reached the Veth fleet in 7 minutes. The aliens tried to shoot them down, and they destroyed many. But there were too many missiles, coming from too many directions, moving too fast. The explosions began. Veth ships were designed to withstand plasma cannons and energy beams. They had shields that could stop almost any weapon in the galaxy. But nuclear weapons did not work like other weapons. They did not simply hit a target. They turned everything around them into fire and radiation and pure destruction. The first Veth carrier broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean. Its pieces fell into the sea like burning rain. Inside, 12,000 Veth soldiers died before they even understood what had killed them. Admiral Cole watched from his flagship in disbelief. Another ship exploded. Then another. Then 5 more. His screens were filling with damage reports and death counts. This was not possible. This was not how invasions worked. "What are those weapons?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," his officer replied. "They appear to be based on atomic fission and fusion. Extremely primitive, extremely destructive." "Primitive?" Cole repeated. The word tasted like poison. On Earth, Lee Sun-woo stood in the command center of his submarine. He was 43 years old and had spent his entire adult life preparing for war. Not this war, perhaps, but war was war, and Sun-woo knew how to fight. "Target locked," his weapons officer reported. "Veth carrier directly above us, altitude 400 kilometers. Sun-woo nodded. "Fire." The submarine launched a spread of modified ICBMs, missiles that had been designed to strike cities on the other side of the world. They flew straight up, punching through the atmosphere, climbing higher and higher until they reached the belly of the alien carrier. The explosion lit up the sky. Sun-woo watched through his periscope as the massive ship broke in half. Debris scattered in every direction. Some pieces burned up in the atmosphere, others fell toward the ocean. "Direct hit," he said quietly. "Reload and find another target." Around the world, the same scene played out again and again. Veth ships died by the dozens. Missiles and railguns and experimental weapons struck them from below. Small human fighters flew suicide missions into their engines. Orbital platforms rammed into their bridges. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. But the humans were not winning. They could not win, not really. For every Veth ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place. Human fighters were fast and brave, but they died by the hundreds. The orbital platforms fell. One by one, Earth's defenses crumbled. By sunset, the Veth had lost 1,200 ships, but they still had 8,500 more. Admiral Cole stood in silence as the casualty reports came in. He had lost more ships in one day than in his last 5 campaigns combined. These humans, these primitive creatures, had hurt his fleet in ways he had never imagined possible. "They are insane," his second officer whispered. "They attacked us with weapons that poisoned their own planet. They flew their ships directly into ours. They have no fear of death." Cole said nothing. He was thinking. On Earth, Taeho received his own reports. The numbers were grim. 60% of orbital defenses destroyed, 200 pilots dead, 3 submarines lost, and the enemy still filled the sky like locusts. "We hurt them," Woojin said. "We hurt them badly." "Not badly enough," Taeho replied. Yoonhana stepped forward. "Let them land. Let them think they have won. And then we show them what humans do when they are pushed into a corner." Taeho looked at the map. Veth landing ships were already descending toward major cities. Millions of alien soldiers would soon walk on Earth's soil. The real war was about to begin. "Activate all resistance networks," he ordered. "Tell everyone to hide their weapons, blend in and wait. We fight them street by street, house by house if we have to. We make them pay for every inch of our world." Hana smiled, but there was no joy in it. They wanted Earth. Let us give them hell instead. Far above, Admiral Cole made his decision. The bombardment had failed. The quick victory was impossible. But he had millions of soldiers and thousands of ships. He would take this planet the old way, with boots on the ground and blood in the streets. "Begin the ground invasion," he ordered. "Kill anyone who resists." The landing ships descended. The Veth believed the hard part was over. They believed that ground combat would be easier, that these small pink creatures would break when faced with real soldiers. They did not know that they were about to walk into a trap that had been thousands of years in the making. They did not know that humans had perfected the art of killing on their own soil. They did not know about guerrilla warfare, about improvised explosives, about the terrible things desperate people could do. They would learn. In the mountains, in the cities, in the forests and deserts and frozen wastelands, humans were waiting. They had guns and knives and bombs strapped to their bodies. They had hatred in their hearts, and nothing left to lose. The Veth wanted war. They had found it. The Veth landed in every corner of the world. Their ships came down like black rain, crushing buildings and trees and everything beneath them. Soldiers poured out by the thousands, tall and gray, and armed with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. In the first week, they took every major city. New York fell in 3 days. Tokyo fell in 2. London, Paris, Beijing, Moscow, they all fell. The Veth raised their flags over burning capitals and believed they had won. They were wrong. No Ha-jun had been a soldier once, a special forces sergeant who had trained for years in the mountains of Korea. When the invasion began, he did not run. He did not hide. He gathered 40 fighters and disappeared into the hills. They had no energy weapons. They had no shields or advanced armor. They had old rifles, homemade bombs, and knowledge that no alien could ever possess. They knew every cave, every path, every shadow in those mountains. They would die there if they had to. The first Veth patrol entered the valley 3 weeks after the landing. 50 soldiers, confident and careless, walking in a straight line as if they owned the earth beneath their feet. Ha-jun watched them through his scope. He counted them. He waited. Patience was the first rule of guerrilla warfare. The Veth walked into the trap without knowing it. Buried explosives waited beneath the path. Hidden fighters waited in the trees. Everything was ready. Ha-jun pulled the trigger. The mountain erupted. Explosions tore through the Veth line. Bullets came from every direction. The alien soldiers tried to fight back, but they could not see their enemies. They fired at trees and rocks and empty air, while humans picked them off one by one. In 4 minutes, all 50 Veth soldiers were dead. Ha-jun's team took their weapons, burned their bodies, and vanished back into the forest. By the time Veth reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left but smoke and silence. This scene repeated itself across the planet. In the jungles of Vietnam, resistance fighters used the same tactics their grandparents had used against invaders decades ago. In the deserts of Africa, nomads led Veth patrols into sandstorms and left them to die. In the frozen north, hunters built traps from ice and bone that killed aliens by the dozens. The Veth did not understand. They had conquered species far more advanced than humans. They had defeated enemies with better technology, bigger armies, stronger bodies. But they had never faced anything like this. Shin Yuna was a combat medic attached to Ha-jun's group. She was small and quiet, and had soft hands that seemed wrong for war. But those hands had learned to do terrible things. When Veth soldiers fell, Yuna was the first to reach them, not to heal them, but to study them. She cut open their bodies and examined their organs. She tested their blood and analyzed their bones. She learned their weaknesses. "Their lungs are sensitive," she reported one night, holding up a piece of alien tissue. "They breathe a different mix of gases than we do. If we could create something to attack their respiratory system, we could kill thousands." The information went up the chain of command. Within weeks, scientists in hidden bunkers had developed a biological weapon, a simple virus modified to target Veth physiology. It spread through the air. It lived on surfaces. And it killed the aliens slowly, painfully, filling their lungs with fluid until they drowned in their own bodies. The Veth called it the choking death. They had no cure. In the cities, the resistance took different forms. Kang Do-hyun was a factory worker before the invasion, a quiet man who had never held a weapon in his life. Now, He organized networks that spanned entire nations. Factory workers sabotaged Veth equipment. They put acid in fuel tanks. They loosened bolts on war machines. They mixed poison into food supplies. Every small act of destruction added up. Children passed messages through the streets, hiding codes in games and songs. Old women smuggled weapons under their clothes. Families built hidden rooms where fighters could sleep and heal and plan their next attack. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a battlefield. The Veth responded with brutality. They burned villages. They executed prisoners. They destroyed entire neighborhoods to kill a single sniper. But for every human they killed, 10 more rose to take their place. Do-hyun was captured once. The Veth tortured him for 3 days, trying to make him reveal the location of his network. On the 4th day, a rescue team broke into the prison and carried him out. "Why did you not talk?" a young fighter asked him later. Do-hyun looked at the boy with tired eyes. "Because if I talked, everyone I love would die. And because my silence killed at least 30 of them during those 3 days. That is a good trade." The war ground on. Months passed. The Veth held the cities, but they could not hold the countryside. They controlled the skies, but they could not control the ground. Every day, their soldiers died to bombs and bullets and biological weapons. Every night, they huddled in their bases, afraid of the darkness. Admiral Cole received reports that made his stomach turn. His army had lost nearly 2 million soldiers. His ships were being destroyed by weapons that seemed to appear from nowhere. His officers were beginning to question the invasion itself. "These creatures are not normal," a general told him. "They fight without hope. They die without fear. They strap explosives to their own children and send them into our camps. What kind of species does this?" Cole had no answer. He had studied thousands of civilizations, and none of them behaved like humans. Most species surrendered when the situation became hopeless. They accepted defeat to save what remained of their people. Humans did not surrender. They did not accept. They fought harder when hope was gone, as if despair itself made them stronger. Cole was beginning to understand something terrible. This invasion would not end with victory. It would end with extinction, one way or another. Either the humans would die, or his army would. There was no middle ground. There was no peace. In the mountains, Ha-jun sat by a fire and cleaned his rifle. His team had shrunk from 40 to 17. Good people had died, but the fight continued. "How long can we keep this up?" a young fighter asked. Ha-jun smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had made peace with death. "As long as we have to," he said. "As long as one human still breathes, we fight. That is who we are. That is what they will never understand." Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. The Veth ships still filled the sky. But somewhere in the darkness, humans were planning their next attack. The war was far from over. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. The world had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. Cities lay in ruins. Forests had become graveyards. The sky was filled with alien ships, and the ground was soaked with blood. But something else had changed too. Humanity had learned. Im So-hee was a physicist from Seoul. Before the war, she had studied theoretical energy systems in a small laboratory that no one cared about. Now she worked in a bunker, deep underground, surrounded by captured Veth technology and a team of the smartest people left alive. "This is it," she said, holding up a small device that glowed with soft blue light. "This is how their shields work." It had taken her 4 months to understand it. 4 months of studying alien metal and impossible energy patterns. 4 months of failures and frustrations and sleepless nights. But now she held the answer in her hands. "Can we build our own?" Taeho asked. "Better than that. We can build something that breaks theirs. Within weeks, the first human energy shields were operational. They were crude copies, weaker than the Veth originals, but they worked. Soldiers who had been dying in the thousands could now survive enemy fire. Vehicles that had been useless could now advance. And Sohi had given them something else, a device that could jam Veth communications. When activated, it would cut enemy ships off from each other, leaving them blind and confused. Commander An Jiho studied the intelligence reports with new eyes. He was a strategic genius, a man who could see patterns where others saw chaos. For months, he had been searching for a weakness in the Veth military structure. Now, he found it. They are connected, he explained to the command team. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of equipment, they all receive orders from the flagship. It is their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. He pointed to a holographic image of the Veth fleet. At its center sat Admiral Cole's flagship, a massive ship 3 times larger than any other. Destroy the command nexus on that ship, and their entire fleet loses coordination. They will panic, they will make mistakes, and we will destroy them. Taeho looked at the image for a long moment. The flagship was surrounded by hundreds of warships. Getting close to it would be almost impossible. Getting inside would be suicide. How do we reach it? He asked. Jiho smiled grimly. We have captured 17 Veth ships over the past 6 months. Most are damaged, but 3 still fly. We disguise them, fill them with our people, and fly straight into the heart of their fleet. The room went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Whoever went on this mission would not come back. She was 31 years old, a pilot who had survived more battles than anyone could count. Her face was scarred from a crash that should have killed her. Her eyes held no fear. I will lead it, she said. Taeho met her gaze. You know what you are asking. I know, Anji replied, and I know that my grandmother survived the occupation of this country when she was a child. My great-grandfather survived a war that killed millions. I am their blood. I am their daughter, and I will not let their sacrifices be wasted. 32 volunteers joined her. Soldiers, engineers, pilots, medics. They knew they were going to die. They prepared anyway. On the night before the mission, Unji gathered her team in a small room lit by candles. Outside, the rumble of distant explosions echoed through the earth. I will not lie to you, she said quietly. We will probably not survive this. But if we succeed, we save everyone. Every mother, every child, every person hiding in basements and caves and forests. We save them all. She looked at each face in turn, young faces and old faces, scared faces and determined faces. Our people have survived everything, invasions, wars, disasters. We survive because we refuse to give up. Tomorrow, we prove that once again. Tomorrow, we show the universe what humans are made of. No one spoke. No one needed to. The next morning, 3 captured Veth ships lifted off from hidden bases and flew towards space. Their identification codes were stolen from dead officers. Their communications channels broadcast Veth military signals. From the outside, they looked like any other enemy vessel. They reached the fleet without incident. Security was loose because the Veth could not imagine that humans would be bold enough to attack the flagship directly. That was their mistake. Yunji guided her ship toward the massive command vessel. Her hands were steady on the controls. Behind her, 29 soldiers prepared their weapons. Docking in 2 minutes, she announced. The ship connected to the flagship's hull. The team cut through an airlock and poured inside. Alarms began to sound immediately. The fighting was brutal. Veth soldiers were bigger and stronger, but humans were faster and more desperate. Yunji watched her people fall one by one. A soldier named Byun took 3 shots to the chest, but kept firing until his gun was empty. A medic named Kwan threw herself on a grenade to save the others. Every death bought a few more meters of progress. By the time they reached the command center, only 3 of them remained. Yunji, a young engineer named Ryu, and an old sergeant named O. The command nexus was a massive pillar of light in the center of the room. Veth officers scrambled to stop them, but O held them back while Ryu set the explosives. 30 seconds, Ryu shouted. O fell, his body riddled with energy burns. Ryu finished the charges and looked at Unji. There was no time to escape. They both knew it. It was an honor, he said. Unji nodded. She thought of her grandmother, a little girl who had survived horrors she could not imagine. She thought of her mother, who had raised her alone after her father died in service. She thought of all the people below, waiting and hoping and fighting. Tell them we did not kneel, she whispered. She pressed the button. The flagship exploded from the inside. The command nexus shattered, sending waves of disruption through the entire Veth fleet. Ships that had been flying in perfect formation suddenly lost contact with each other. Officers who had been giving orders received nothing but static. Panic spread like wildfire. On Earth, Tejo watched the sensors light up. The enemy fleet was in chaos. All units, he said into the command channel, attack now. Human forces launched from every hiding place. Ships that had been waiting struck at confused enemies. Soldiers who had been defending now advanced. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was on the offensive. The Veth fleet began to break apart. Ships fled in every direction, chased by human weapons and human rage. Those that tried to fight were destroyed. Those that tried to surrender were not heard. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of his secondary vessel and watched his armada crumble. Everything he had built, everything he had conquered, was falling apart before his eyes. Order a full retreat, he said, his voice hollow. The remaining ships turned and ran toward the edge of the solar system, pursued by enemies they had once dismissed as primitive. The tide had turned. Humanity was coming. The Veth fleet ran like wounded animals fleeing a predator. Ships that had once moved with perfect coordination now scattered across space, each captain thinking only of survival. Behind them, human forces pursued with terrible patience. Choi Woo-jin commanded the chase from his rebuilt flagship. His fleet had grown during the war, bolstered by captured Veth vessels and new ships built in underground factories. They were still outnumbered, but that no longer mattered. Do not let them escape, he ordered. Every ship that leaves this system will tell others where we are. Hunt them down. The humans obeyed. They chased Veth ships through asteroid fields and around moons. They destroyed any vessel that was too slow or too damaged to run. The darkness of space filled with fire and debris. Of the 9,700 ships that had arrived to conquer Earth, only a small fraction remained. They fled toward the edge of the solar system, their engines burning at maximum power, their crews praying to gods that had never answered. Admiral Cole sat in silence on his bridge. Around him, officers worked frantically to maintain their course, but he did not see them. He was remembering. He remembered arriving in this system with absolute confidence. He remembered looking at the small blue planet and seeing easy prey. He remembered laughing at human weapons and human tactics and human stubbornness. He was not laughing now. A junior officer approached him cautiously. Admiral, we have counted the surviving ships. 17. Only 17 made it out of the system. Cole closed his eyes. 17 out of 9,700. It was not a defeat. It was annihilation. Set course for home, he said quietly. We must warn the Council. The 17 ships limped through space, their hulls scarred by battle, their crews hollow with shock. They carried no prisoners because no humans had surrendered. They carried no treasure because everything they had stolen had been taken back. They carried only failure and fear. On Earth, the celebrations began slowly. People emerged from bunkers and basements, blinking in the sunlight. They looked up at skies that were finally empty of alien ships. They embraced strangers and wept for the dead. But Lieutenant General Tejo did not celebrate. He stood before a memorial that covered an entire hillside, a wall of names carved into black stone. 89 million names. Every human who had died defending their world. Yoon Hana stood beside him. "We won," she said softly. "We survived," Tejo replied. "That is not the same thing." He ran his fingers across the names. Soldiers and civilians, children and elders, people who had fought with weapons and people who had fought with nothing but their bare hands. They had all given everything. A small girl approached the memorial. Her name was Jang Nari, and she was 8 years old. Her parents had died in the first week of the invasion. Her brother had died fighting in the mountains. She had no one left. She placed a small flower at the base of the wall, and looked up at Tejo with eyes too old for her face. "Did we beat them?" she asked. Tejo knelt down to meet her gaze. "Yes, we beat them." "Will they come back?" Tejo looked at the sky. The stars were bright and cold, hiding dangers that humanity was only beginning to understand. The Veth had come from those stars. Others might follow. "Maybe," he admitted. "But if they do, we will be ready." Nari nodded seriously, as if she understood things that children should not have to understand. Perhaps she did. Far across the galaxy, the 17 Veth ships arrived at their homeworld. Admiral Cole walked into the High Council chamber alone, his uniform torn and dirty, his body bent with exhaustion. The counselors stared at him in disbelief. "Report," the High Chancellor demanded. Cole stood before them and told the truth. He told them about the nuclear weapons that had torn his fleet apart. He told them about the guerrilla fighters who killed his soldiers in the night. He told them about the biological weapons and the suicide attacks, and the humans who strapped bombs to their own bodies. He told them about Moon Unji, a pilot who had flown into the heart of his flagship and destroyed it with herself inside. When he finished, the chamber was silent. "What are they?" a counselor finally asked. "What manner of creatures would do such things?" Cole thought for a long moment before answering. "They are called humans. They are small and weak and fragile. They live less than a century. They bleed easily. They break easily. But they do not stop. They do not yield. They do not surrender. When they have nothing left to lose, they become something else. Something that fears nothing. Not pain, not death, not even extinction." He paused, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "We sent 9,700 ships to take their world. Only 17 returned. And those 17 carry wounds that will never heal. I have conquered 40 worlds, and I have never seen anything like these creatures. They are not soldiers. They are not warriors. They are something worse. They are survivors." The council deliberated for 7 days. In the end, they made their decision. The Sol system was declared forbidden space. Warning beacons were placed at every approach, broadcasting a message that would repeat for 1,000 years. "Do not enter. Do not approach. Do not make contact." The humans were to be left alone. On Earth, reconstruction began. Cities were rebuilt from rubble. Farms were replanted. Schools reopened. Life slowly returned to something like normal. But humanity had changed. They had looked into the darkness of space and seen enemies waiting. They had felt the weight of extinction pressing down on them. And they had survived. Tejo stood in a new command center, watching the construction of Earth's first interstellar shipyard. Ships were being built, better and stronger than anything before. Weapons were being developed. Defenses were being prepared. "We were lucky this time," Jiho said, joining him at the window. "The Veth underestimated us. The next enemy might not make that mistake." Tejo nodded. then we must be ready, not just to defend, to strike first if we have to make sure that no one ever threatens our home again. Below them, workers moved like ants, building the future. Young people trained in academies that taught alien languages and combat tactics. Scientists studied captured technology and pushed beyond it. Humanity was preparing for a universe that wanted them dead. In a small apartment near the shipyard, Nari sat by her window and watched the stars. She was alone, but she was not afraid. She had seen the worst that the universe could throw at her people, and she had seen them survive. Someday, she knew, she would join those ships flying into the darkness. Someday she would carry humanity's flag to distant worlds. Someday she would stand before alien councils and remind them of what her species could do. But for now, she was content to watch and wait and remember. The Veth had come to conquer a primitive species on a small blue planet. They had expected sheep. They had found wolves. And those wolves were now looking outward with hungry eyes. The stars belonged to everyone. Humanity intended to claim their share. The journey was just beginning. And somewhere in the darkness, the 17 surviving Veth ships drifted through space, their crews haunted by memories of a species that should have been easy prey. They would tell stories about the humans for generations. Stories of creatures who fought without hope and died without fear. Stories of a planet that had become a graveyard for the greatest armada ever assembled. They would tell these stories as warnings, and the universe would listen.